People dream of houses, people dream of cars, people dream of trips, people dream of material stuff. But me, what I dream of is to have one day my face clean completely out and my, any visible tattoos gone.
My name is Mauricio. I'm 36 years old. Like many teenagers, right, you go through certain situations growing up, especially in a city like this, New York City, right? So I grew up in Jackson Heights. That's a very Latino community. There was a lot of gangs around my area and stuff like that. So I hang out with gangs and friends. You don't go to school. Instead you cut class, you go smoke some weed, do whatever you do with your friends, and that's how it started, just hanging out with the wrong people. And also my upbringing was very rough. Like I said, I'm from Colombia. I was born in Colombia. I grew up with my dad and my grandmother. My dad, when I was 33, no, I'm sorry, he was 33. I was 8 years old. He got murdered. He got shot in the head and he died. And so I feel like that was the moment in my life where really things started going dark. My mom wasn't there. She came to this country when I was 2 years old, right? So it was just me and my grandmother and my cousins and my family back home. And so that really like affected me. And my mom brought me here when I was around 10, 9, 10, for a better future, but she kind of separated me from my grandmother. So I feel like all those traumas such a young age, not growing up with your mom, and then your dad gets killed, and then you come here, you get separated from your grandmother, and then my mom was married and she was pregnant. I didn't know about these things, so I feel like it was just too much to handle, and to adapt to your environment. It was very tough. So I guess I started, rebelling and doing a lot of things and hanging out with other kids that also had similar stories, and that one thing led to another, and I started doing drugs. Like a lot of people started with weed and alcohol, and then you start doing the harder drugs, and then you do cocaine, and eventually I just started smoking crack towards the end. So I left my house young. I was 14 years old when I left my mom's house. We couldn't meet eye to eye. So from 10 to 14, that's the only time I really lived with her. So left with my older brother. My brother at the time, he was doing what he was doing. Then I started tattooing, right? So that was like kind of a passion that I had for art and tattoos. And so it was kind of like everything, right? So I always had like a little bit of depression and the drug addiction and situation with my family. But I feel like another point that kind of like hit me really hard was when my brother went to jail. So he ended up doing 5 years in the feds, and then he got deported. But that really threw me away because he was kind of like that father figure. And then I had a situation with my wife also at the time, and everything plus the drug addiction, and I kind of became homeless. And so it was funny because when I started doing my apprenticeship, the owner of the shop, she allowed me to sleep in the shop during the day. During the nighttime. And then I would shower during the day. She actually visited me in that place a couple times, right? You remember. And so I did that for a couple of months actually, because I was learning how to tattoo. You don't make money when you're an apprentice. Also surrounding myself with tattoo artists, people that had a lot of tattoos, and I guess all the anger that I had bottled up inside of me. Supposedly I said back then that I wanted people that when they look at me, they knew what I was about. So like I mentioned yesterday, I used to think like I was super tough and untouchable, and I didn't care about anything, and I would try to fight whoever. I didn't care, whatever. I was that type of person. But I knew I was just a depressed person, right? A really sad person with all the situations. And I just started putting these tattoos on my face, man. I started putting tattoos on my face, on my neck, my hands. Didn't care. And things just kept getting worse and worse and out of control. And starting doing more drugs. Like I said, smoking crack, sleeping in the train, slept in another tattoo shop in the Bronx. It was just very unstable, very unstable. With my wife, I was also like on and off, because unfortunately I was going through my own situation. She was trying to be as supportive as possible, but she's only human. And actually I feel like the main character here should be her, but she's camera shy, so I'm speaking for us. But So, I'm going through a lot of things. And so one day I'm tattooing this client in Queens. I was staying in this place and I'm doing a whole sleeve. I remember it was like a Japanese style sleeve, black and gray. And so I had a picture of my brother in jail, and they knew each other before he got locked up and before he went to jail. So he's like, hey, listen, I know that guy. And I was like, yeah, that's my older brother. And so he was like, I want to invite you to a church. I'm talking to you. And I was always very open. I think I've always been very open about my life. And he was like, listen, I go to a church where, God speaks, God talks to you and he makes promises. And I feel like this will be really good for you. And I ended up going with my wife. And it's been 11 years since then. And so once I started going to church, I stopped tattooing because I wanted to change, right? So I fell in love with church. I fell in love with God and His Word, the Bible, and I started going. And I remember I was invited on a Sunday, and then I started going Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It was like that. Like I had that thirst inside of me because I was so miserable, And so I started surrounding myself with different people, right? People that don't do drugs, people that go to school, people that have jobs, professions, a partner, stable home, stable household, kids, right? The whole 9 yards. And so I wanted that too. So God promised me that He was going to change my life. He was going to allow me to go back to school. He was going to give me a profession. He was going to fix my relationship with my wife. And He also promised this change, the change of my appearance and all these things. So I stopped tattooing, like I said, and then I started picking up like a lot of odd jobs, right? And I started doing construction because in construction they take anybody, right? So I started doing construction, and so they kind of motivated me too, like, hey, if you really want to go to school, you should give it a try. So I actually did like a 2-year certification program. I liked it in project management. That's when I decided to go back to college, and that's when I went to City Tech, where I did my 6 years. But I knew going to school wasn't going to be enough. My appearance was going to play a big role. Like I've mentioned before, I've gotten stopped by the police. One time I was in her car and the police saw me getting her car looking the way I did, and, they stopped us. Crossing through Canada, the passport picture, they stopped me a lot. I went one time, I remember I was with my in-laws in the back seat. They stopped everybody. They never been stopped before, but because of the picture in my passport, they stopped us. They searched us. So it was like a constant, being looked on the train, being looked in the street. The police is looking at you. People are looking at you. You go through a neighborhood infested with gangs. They're going to look at you too. So it was just a constant, right, uncomfortable situation, which I knew that's what I had to deal with because that's the consequences of your actions. But I was dealing with it as the best I could, but I wanted it all. I wanted it off. I knew it was very expensive, right? So I didn't have the money at the time, and that's when my wife came across Clean Slate, and she was like, "Hey, listen, maybe reach out. You never know." Actually, people from church were telling me, there's nothing impossible for God. He could put somebody there to help you, and so I did. Took some pictures, sent it to Jeff, and surprisingly, he was like, "Yeah, I've always wanted to work with somebody with a similar story like you that had a past and now is trying to change the future." And so he was like, just come and let's talk. And so we started 6 years ago, and it's been painful. It has been a blessing, at the same time. It has been a very big blessing. I feel happy, If I remember correctly, I think we used to do so half of my face, half of my neck, one treatment. And I want to say one hand, if I remember correctly. And then we used to do the other half of the face, half of my neck, and then the other hand. And then you stop for 3 months, right? Or 2 months, and you come back. And then in the summertime, because I used to work outside, because construction, I work outside. And so we used to have to stop to be careful with the sun, so you don't damage your skin. Your skin is already sensitive because of the treatments. And then for a while now, so towards the end, I know we were taking longer breaks now. So we were doing like, I want to say every 6 months now, because the ink was less. So how it works, from what I understand, is you have the ink, they laser the ink, and then you break down the particles. Don't count me on it. You could ask Jeff or Alonso; they should know better than me. But you break up the ink, and then it's your immune system, the one that's clearing out this ink slowly, right? So typically black ink is more, I guess, it attracts the heat better of the laser. And then I had blue because I used to have a blade here, so a switchblade. So the blue, I guess it took a little bit longer. Yellow, I know it's kind of hard, from what I understand, for the laser to be attracted to the color. And so yellow, I had some brass knuckles here, so it took a while for them to also erase. But I had here a curse word, FU. I had a New York City sign here, all blacked out, and I used to have respect across my eyebrow here. I used to have my cousin's name that he passed away. He used to also be a drug addict, and back home in Colombia, unfortunately, they killed his mom. His dad passed away at a very young age. He took the streets also. Unfortunately, he didn't get the opportunity to change like me, and he kind of just disappeared. And back home, when they disappear, they're gone, right? So the eyelids now, that was an interesting one. So, long story short, Jeff, wasn't comfortable with doing the eyelids. And I'm gonna be honest, when I started doing the face, I was also nervous because, I'm the type of guy, like, if you get a scar here and there, it's like whatever to me, to be honest. I'm not too crazy about looks and things like that. I'm very careless sometimes, which is not good, but that's how I am. So I was like, if this scar on my hands doing the treatment, I'm okay with it. If this scar on my neck, whatever. But if this scar on my face, I mean, it's your face, right? So I was nervous, but I was happy I found them because they were really good. Like, there's no scars, nothing. And but so my eyelids, right? So I knew it was very dangerous. I knew there was a risk. You could go blind, you could get a infection, they could scratch your cornea. And so Jeff didn't want to do it. I had to respect it, of course. I kind of tried to push him a little bit, but he was just pushing back. He's like, no, you might have to stay like that. Kind of made me sad, to be honest. I went through this process, took the pain for so many years. Even though they were helping me, which was a big help, there were times where I used to do the treatment and I felt like crying because the pain, right? Just knowing that I put myself through this, knowing that even just when I was getting my face done, I was still a little bit sad because I knew I still had the eyelids there, the eyelid tattoos, right? And I was like, I would go home and I'll be like, man, why did I do that? Why didn't just, maybe, you start thinking, you're like, maybe if I didn't have the eyelid tattoos, you finish with your face and this would have been done. I didn't have to deal with the eyelids. I work on public jobs, right? So MTA, New York State DOT, Port Authority. Every time you do a job, you join a new project, you have to get interviewed by the owner. Meaning the owner, meaning like a bunch of professional engineers, right? Typically, you're normal guy that went to school, graduated, got his professional engineering license, and then so you walk in, even if you have a suit on and all these credentials and degrees and experience, and then you have to sit in front of them with Latin pride across your eyelids, right? And then you have to interview. But thank God, I guess they gave me the opportunity and they gave me the jobs. But so the eyelids was always in the back of my mind. And then, I always believe God puts the right people in your path. And Jeff was like, listen, after many years of him saying no, and I was like, look, eventually I'm a little bit stubborn and I guess I take risks in life, obviously, because of my lifestyle. But I was like, if you're not gonna do it, eventually I'm gonna go to someone, and that might be a higher risk because they could lie to you and be like, yes, I know how to do it, and then they practice, how it is. And so I was like, but hey, if that's what's gonna happen, that's what's gonna happen. And then luckily he was like, hey, if you're gonna do it with somebody, that somebody is Lorenzo. And so he presented me to Lorenzo, or presented Lorenzo to me, and we started doing the eyelid treatments. And I'm pushing Lorenzo a lot too, because I'm just like trying to get it done. And he's like, hey, if you want, we could take a break. And I'm like, no, get as many treatments as we can right now, safely, of course. And I was also scared I remember my wife knows when I did the first treatment on the eyelids. I almost said no, to be honest. I think I haven't told them, but I remember that day I almost said no. You know what? Forget it. I think I'm just gonna keep it. And I remember I went to church. I think a day before, 2 days before, I spoke to the pastor, and I was like, listen, I'm very nervous. You know, I've been doing these treatments on my face, my hands, my neck for 6 years, but I feel like this is the biggest challenge so far, and I'm nervous to go blind. You know, your mind starts playing tricks with you, and I'm like, I'm scared. I don't know. And what if something goes wrong? And they were like, no, you know, trust in God, and if this is happening, it's because there's a purpose for this. You know, there's a purpose at the end. You're going through all these situations because God has a plan with you, and you just gotta trust in Him and continue. And I remember he prayed for me, and I said, all right, let's go. And so I came, and it's been already, like 5-6 treatments. They were really dark, actually. I have pictures. If you really look at them before, they were really dark. And now they're a lot lighter, and I just can't wait, man. I mean, every time I wake up, I feel like I'm in a dream. Sometimes I cry by myself. Being very honest. I could wake up one morning and I start just going through my pictures and thinking about the crazy journey and all the ups and downs, all the challenges, going to school, studying certifications, going to church, working, my wife, working on myself. I'm still not perfect, but I'm working on myself, trying to be better. I'm not the same person like before, but I still have things that I have to work on, and trying to work on my spiritual life. But it feels amazing, brother, to be honest. Even just talking right now, I feel something in my heart, like it just feels amazing. Yeah, so now I'm a project manager. So I'm an assistant project manager and a project manager in the JFK airport. It's a $19 million program. Everybody there is super smart. I'm amazed just to be around by so much talent. Eventually, I became a project manager for one of the concrete batch plants. Well, the only concrete batch plants, because they have an internal concrete batch plant in the program. And yeah, man, I'm doing great. And I'm just graduated in June. I'm pursuing more certifications. I gotta pursue my engineering license. Might get a master's in the future. I mean, I just want to push, man. I just want to push. Rebuild my relationship with my mom, because we had a terrible relationship. Now we have a good relationship. You know, it's never perfect, but it's a good relationship. My brothers. So yeah, man, I feel like I'm living the dream, man. I feel very blessed, very lucky, however you want to call it. But it's just, I say, if I die tomorrow, I die happy, bro. I mean, I think there's no words to describe, man. To be honest, like, I wish like they probably already do, but I wish they could like see or feel how appreciative I am, because I know without them, this wouldn't be possible, man. And I think my life is a humbling experience too, because I know without my wife, it wouldn't be possible either. So where I'm going with this is, in life, you always need people to get to places, right? She supported me a lot while I was going to school, and she helped me in many ways. So I wouldn't be able to reach a degree without her support, and vice versa. And so same thing with them, right? So I wouldn't be able to get to where I'm at right now without them helping me with removing the tattoos, right? So all I could say, man, is like, they really are doing a big thing in my life, and they're really helping me in great ways. So forever in my heart, you know, they will always be there. And all I could say is thank you. And I don't want to get emotional here, but it's just, I just want them to know, like, this is a big deal for me. You know, it's a big deal.